These forbidden World War II photos were never meant for your eyes. Each image hides a secret of power, pain, and truth the world tried to erase. You're about to uncover history they didn't want you to see. So before we begin, hit subscribe and step into the past they tried to hide. Captured Japanese soldiers were rarely photographed by Allied forces, and when they were, the images were often suppressed. This particular photo from the Battle of Saipan shows young Japanese men, barely more than boys, disarmed and terrified. Japanese propaganda insisted that surrender was dishonorable, so photos like this were forbidden in Japan. On the American side, such images were also hidden, because they disrupted the narrative of a fanatical enemy who fought to the death. The truth is far more complicated. Many soldiers wanted to live, but were trapped between survival and shame. This single image reveals the forbidden humanity of the so-called enemy, a reminder that war dehumanizes not only those who fight, but also those who view them from afar. The famous image of Soviet soldiers raising the flag over the Reichstag is iconic, but the uncensored version is far more revealing. In this forbidden photo, one soldier's wrist is covered with stolen watches, looted from the chaos of war. Soviet officials quickly ordered the photo to be retouched, erasing the evidence of plunder. What was meant to symbolize victory also revealed human flaws: greed, opportunism, survival instincts. The forbidden version, rarely shown, reminds us that even in moments of triumph, war leaves its stain. Every army, every nation, carried both glory and shame. By seeing the unaltered truth, we recognize the complexity behind symbols that history books often simplify. This rare photograph shows hundreds of Londoners crammed inside an underground station, seeking safety during German air raids. Official images from the Blitz often highlighted resilience and bravery, but this candid shot reveals the desperation. Children sleeping on newspapers, mothers clutching infants, elderly men with eyes full of dread. Authorities feared that such photos would weaken morale, so many were never released to the public. Yet the truth is undeniable. Ordinary life was torn apart, and survival meant learning to sleep with the sound of bombs overhead. Today, this image forces us to reflect not only on the destruction of war but also on the quiet endurance of civilians who had no choice but to endure. It is not a picture of victory, it is a portrait of survival. At first glance, this photograph seems harmless, a young German soldier smiling inside a muddy trench during World War II. But what makes this image forbidden is the contradiction it reveals. Nazi propaganda wanted the world to see only heroic warriors, fearless and disciplined. Yet here we see vulnerability, even innocence, in a man caught in the machine of war. He is dirty, exhausted, and his eyes betray fear. This image was hidden because it stripped away the myth of the unstoppable Nazi army. It reminds us that behind uniforms and propaganda, there were human beings, boys barely out of their teens, sent to fight in a war they did not control. Such photos were censored because they weakened the carefully crafted image of power. For modern viewers, this image is a haunting reminder. Wars are fought not by faceless armies, but by fragile individuals. Among the most disturbing forbidden images are those smuggled out of Nazi concentration camps. This photo, taken secretly by a German officer, reveals skeletal prisoners in striped uniforms, standing in silence. Such images were banned by the Nazi regime because they exposed the reality of the Holocaust, evidence of starvation, cruelty, and genocide. Unlike propaganda films that depicted camps as work colonies, this photograph tells the truth that officials wanted to erase. Every face in the frame tells a story of suffering. These forbidden photos became crucial evidence at the Nuremberg trials, proving crimes that might otherwise have been dismissed as rumor. Looking at this picture today is not easy, but it is necessary. It is a reminder of why history must never be censored. This photograph was considered too personal for wartime release. An American soldier, his rifle leaning against a sandbag, is lost in a letter from home. His helmet is tilted back, his posture slumped. Not the image of the confident, victorious warrior that the US government preferred to circulate. Such humanizing photos were often withheld because they reminded the public of the emotional toll of war. Soldiers were not machines. They were sons, brothers, husbands who longed for home. This picture, forbidden at the time, resonates deeply today because it captures something timeless, the power of human connection even in the darkest moments. It is not just a soldier we see. It is every soldier who ever waited for a word from home. This powerful and rarely shown photograph captures German civilians being marched through a liberated concentration camp by Allied soldiers. Faces of shock, denial, and grief fill the frame as men and women are confronted with the crimes committed in their name. For decades, many of these photos were suppressed because they challenged post-war narratives of ignorance among ordinary Germans. Yet here we see undeniable evidence. Civilians who could no longer look away. The image is disturbing not because of violence, but because of silence, the heavy silence of realization. It reminds us that war crimes do not exist in isolation. They ripple through entire societies. This forbidden photograph forces us to ask a painful question. How much did people know, and how much did they choose not to see? This haunting photograph shows French women, their heads shaved, being paraded through the streets after the liberation of France. They were accused of collaborating with German soldiers, sometimes for survival, sometimes for love, sometimes falsely. These photos were rarely published because they exposed an uncomfortable truth. Liberation was not only joyous, it was brutal. Thousands of women faced public humiliation, violence, and lifelong shame. The forbidden nature of this photo lies in its moral complexity. Who decides guilt in times of war? Who deserves punishment? And who deserves forgiveness? This image does not give easy answers, but it does force us to confront the gray areas of justice in wartime. Here we see the remains of a school in Warsaw, Poland, destroyed by German bombing. Desks overturned, books scattered, walls shattered. The photograph was considered too sensitive to share widely, because it symbolized the destruction not only of buildings but of innocence itself. In a single frame, education, childhood, and the future of a generation are reduced to rubble. Images like this were hidden because they did not inspire courage, they inspired despair. Yet today, this forbidden photo stands as a chilling reminder of what war truly costs. Beyond soldiers and battles, it destroys the very places meant to nurture hope and knowledge. This rare photo shows captured American soldiers being marched through German streets. Such images were strictly controlled during wartime, as governments feared they would demoralize citizens back home. Instead of victorious soldiers, we see exhausted men, stripped of power and dignity, walking under guard. It is a forbidden view of war, the moment when even the strongest armies are reduced to human fragility. These photographs were hidden not only for propaganda reasons, but also because they blurred the line between victor and victim. For modern audiences, they serve as a sobering reminder that in war, suffering is universal, and even heroes are not spared. This photograph captures children from the Warsaw Ghetto orphanage, some barefoot, some holding hands, walking through the ruined streets. Most of these children would not survive the war. Photos like this were often hidden because they revealed the human tragedy behind statistics. Instead of faceless numbers, we see small bodies, innocent faces, and fragile hope. Forbidden at the time, such images were considered too dangerous for morale, as they could stir outrage against German authorities. Yet today, this photograph stands as undeniable testimony that behind every war headline are children whose laughter was silenced too soon. This chilling photo shows young Japanese pilots posing for a final portrait before embarking on kamikaze missions. Many were barely 18 or 19 years old. While official wartime propaganda celebrated them as noble heroes, the forbidden images reveal nervous smiles, trembling hands, and the weight of fear in their eyes. The Japanese government often censored such photos because they betrayed the truth. Many pilots did not wish to die, but had no choice. This image forces us to reconsider the myth of honor and see the humanity of young men caught in a system that demanded their sacrifice. This striking image shows Lyudmila Pavlichenko, one of the most feared snipers of World War II, posing with her rifle. While Soviet propaganda celebrated her kills, many other photos of female snipers were kept hidden, as they challenged traditional ideas of gender roles in war. Women on the battlefield were both respected and feared, breaking stereotypes in ways governments weren't ready to show the world. This forbidden photo reveals not just a fighter, but a symbol of resilience, an ordinary woman who became extraordinary when history demanded it. It reminds us that war reshaped identities in ways that society struggled to accept. This devastating photograph shows survivors wandering through the flattened ruins of Hiroshima in the hours after the atomic bomb. The US government heavily restricted such images, fearing they would provoke international outrage and domestic guilt. Instead of focusing on military victory, this forbidden photo forces us to see human suffering, burned skin, destroyed homes, and silent confusion. For years, such images were classified, hidden from the public eye. Today, they remind us of the price of technological warfare, where entire cities and countless lives can vanish in a single moment. It is perhaps the most haunting reminder of humanity's darkest capability. This raw image from Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944, shows the lifeless bodies of Allied soldiers lying where they fell, waves washing over them. While triumphant images of soldiers storming the beach were circulated, photographs of the dead were heavily suppressed. They risked shattering morale back home, where families were told of bravery but not of the brutal cost. Forbidden at the time, this photo strips away the romanticized vision of D-Day and shows the terrible price of freedom. It's a stark reminder that victory was written in blood and sacrifice, not just strategy and speeches. In this photograph, barefoot children wander through the rubble of Stalingrad, their homes reduced to dust. While propaganda praised Soviet resilience, forbidden photos like this revealed the unbearable suffering of civilians. The children's hollow eyes tell a story of hunger, loss, and innocence stolen by war. Such images were censored because they could undermine the idea of glorious defense. Yet they remain vital historical evidence, forcing us to confront not just the military struggle but the human tragedy of total war. This single image is as powerful as any battlefield victory. It shows the real casualties of empire and ideology. This controversial image shows Benito Mussolini's body after his execution, hanging upside down in Milan. Authorities tried to control the circulation of such photographs, fearing they would fuel unrest or create martyrdom. But the rawness of this forbidden photo reveals the collapse of fascism in its most brutal form. Crowds jeered, spat, and threw objects, turning justice into spectacle. For viewers today, it is not just a shocking scene but a profound reminder of how quickly power can collapse, and how vengeance often takes the place of justice at the end of dictatorships. This rare image shows inflatable rubber tanks lined up in a field, part of the U.S. Army's Ghost Army, a deception unit that tricked German forces with fake vehicles, sound effects, and dummy camps. While not bloody, these photos were long classified, because they revealed secret military tactics that relied more on creativity than firepower. Forbidden at the time, this image shows war not just as destruction, but also as illusion, where imagination became a weapon. It's a fascinating twist in the story of World War II, proof that sometimes the most effective weapon is not a gun, but a clever lie. This forbidden image shows Polish teachers and intellectuals being executed by Nazi soldiers during the invasion of Poland. The Nazis deliberately targeted the educated elite, aiming to erase Poland's culture and leadership. Such photos were rarely released, as they revealed deliberate acts of genocide against civilians, not just soldiers. The despair on the victims' faces, some clutching books and coats, speaks to the systematic destruction of knowledge and identity. This photograph is not just about war, it is about the attempt to destroy a nation's soul through the silencing of its teachers. This image shows Japanese-American families in the United States, lined up with luggage as they were forced into internment camps. For decades, many such photos were hidden, because they revealed a dark chapter of U.S. history. Innocent men, women, and children lost homes, businesses, and freedom, not for crimes, but because of fear and prejudice. The photo is striking in its quiet sadness. Children holding dolls, mothers carrying blankets, fathers looking down in silence. This forbidden image forces us to question the fine line between security and injustice, and how fear can strip away liberty in even the most democratic nations. In this rare photograph, African-American soldiers are seen manning artillery in France. While thousands of black men fought bravely, their contributions were often erased from official histories, and many images were withheld. This forbidden photo highlights not only their courage but also the hypocrisy of fighting for freedom abroad while enduring segregation and racism at home. The determination in their faces is unforgettable. A reminder that history is not just about battles, but about recognition, dignity, and the voices too often silenced. This haunting photo, taken before Frank and her family were captured, shows her smiling shyly at the camera. While her diary became world famous, forbidden photographs of her final days in the transit camps were suppressed for decades. The Nazis didn't want the world to see the faces of their young victims, as it humanized the tragedy too much. Looking at this picture, knowing her fate, makes it impossible to ignore the individual lives lost in the Holocaust. Anne's photo is not just an image, It is a symbol of millions of children whose stories ended too soon. This rare photo shows emaciated Australian and British prisoners of war forced to build the infamous Burma Railway under brutal Japanese captivity. Known as the Death Railway, it claimed over 100,000 lives, including civilians and POWs. The Japanese government forbade the release of such images, as they revealed cruelty and suffering that contradicted their propaganda. The photograph captures the despair etched into hollow eyes and thin frames, but also resilience, the will to survive against all odds. It is a painful reminder of how human beings were treated as disposable tools in the machinery of war. This photograph captures university students tossing books into massive bonfires under Nazi supervision. Works of Jewish, communist, and un-German authors were destroyed in public spectacles. While some images were staged as propaganda, others like this, showing sadness, unease, and even secret resistance, were hidden. The Nazis feared that the world might see them not as cultural protectors, but as destroyers of knowledge. This forbidden photo reminds us that the first step toward tyranny is not just violence. It is erasing ideas, silencing voices, and burning the memory of freedom. Here, rows of Soviet women assemble weapons in massive factories while men fought on the front lines. Although many of these photos were celebrated, others were restricted because they showed the exhaustion, injuries, and harsh conditions endured by female workers. The forbidden side of this story reveals how women were not just symbols of resilience, but victims of overwork and deprivation. Their hollow eyes and worn hands tell a deeper truth, that the cost of war was carried not only on the battlefield, but also in the endless grind of factories that turned human beings into machines. This rare image shows Parisian civilians walking past German soldiers stationed at the Eiffel Tower. Smiles on some locals' faces were censored from propaganda because they risked revealing the uncomfortable truth. Occupation wasn't only about resistance. It also meant collaboration, survival, and quiet compromises. The forbidden photograph shows the shades of gray in human behavior during war, far from the heroic black and white stories often told. This single image asks a disturbing question. In the face of occupation, would we resist, collaborate, or simply survive? This haunting photo, taken in the ruins of Berlin, shows Hitler with trembling hands and a vacant stare just weeks before his death. The image was hidden because it exposed weakness instead of strength. Nazi propaganda had carefully built an image of an invincible leader, but here we see a frail, broken man staring at the collapse of his empire. This forbidden photograph strips away myth and power, leaving only the tragic reality of a dictator destroyed by his own ambitions. It is proof that even the most feared leaders are still mortal, still vulnerable to the weight of their own actions. The past doesn't whisper, it waits. And every time you return, another secret will reveal itself. Subscribe and hit the bell to uncover the next hidden story from history's shadows.